you know, I get the sense that you came from a musical family. You know, I get the sense. I mean, and maybe I'm off base by this, but I feel like there was other members in your family who were singers, other people who were creatively talented. Am I off base with that?
Only my dad. My dad fancied himself a singer, still does. Um, but I don't know, for whatever reason, he just never had the chops to go for it. You know, down here in the South, I imagine, especially during his time, growing up, things were still segregated, and life was probably a lot different as far as opportunity is concerned. But as I started to do some of the history behind our name, there's a theater called the the Black Academy of Arts and Letters downtown. There's a theater inside that building that's named after a great relative of mine. So to say that the arts are in this bloodline is right on the money. I just don't know them.
Why do you think your mom had reservations about you being an entertainer?
Like I said, they grew up in a different era. You know what I mean? And we don't want to gloss over racism like they do these days, as if it's just a word and not a reality, as if it's just a temperament and not a plight. Um, People have to deal with that, and folks down here, especially in my mother's age group, probably had to deal with it in a cold-blooded way. So she probably never saw the opportunities that I saw as a kid. She thought, I'd end up being in the streets and doing what my cousins did, just hanging around and, want to be a thug guy or go to jail or this. And she didn't want that. One of my uncles was a Marine, and he did really well for himself, built him a really great family, and is one of the veterans that we thank every year on Memorial Day. And so she wanted me to be like him. He's her older brother, and she wanted that for her son.
And so you run away like you were joining the circus.
You know what I mean?
You get to
let me get the hell out of here.
And you get to LA and you get to the studio and you're with NWA. You know, I think of Ice Cube as being one of the most competitive MCs I've ever had the pleasure of being around, I've ever heard on wax, just in general. You know, it seemed like he was writing against the entire world every time I heard him. You know, I look at Eazy-E as a personality I don't think we've ever seen, a visionary and entertainer I don't think we've ever seen, ever. You know, and I don't say that lightly because we've seen a lot of incredible people, especially coming out of this camp. And then there's Dr. Dre, who is the wizard of all wizards, the most successful producer in hip-hop history. And you know, you got Yella, you got Ren, you've got the iconic NWA. And you sit down in that studio session the first time. What goes through your mind? How do you feel? I mean, you're a fish out of two waters, in my opinion. No disrespect, but you're from the South. You sound like an East Coast cat. You just landed in LA.
Well, rap hadn't made its self, hadn't created its place yet. Everything was still East Coast. All the rap in LA was mostly JJ Fad and the World Class Wrecking Crew and the LA Dream Team. It was really poppy, and it hadn't found its space yet. But people like King T were starting to show up, in Easy, in NWA, and Too Short. Once they made Colors, the movie, and Ice-T started to break out, then they started to really define their identity. But because most of that music was so street, for lack of a better way of putting it, the radio wasn't having any of it out there. And so they could never really get on like the guys in New York were getting on because LA radio wasn't having it. But I knew that. Cubes likes to say they never thought that they were going to be any bigger than, underground artists and neighborhood artists. But I knew I never thought that. I knew what was there, not just because of Cube's skill set and Dre's skill set, but mainly, because of those two skill sets. I knew how big they were if they could get over that line. So I took it upon myself to be the guy to help them, sort of turn what they were doing into commercially viable records, subject matter and content. I used to always say, I make it so the white folks can hear it and like it and laugh and have fun and yada, yada, yada. Because if you do that, then it makes the corporate people more apt to want to be next to you and not run from you, which was their hang up, And in the end, just turns out that was the key that they needed, because once Eazy got on the radio, then you couldn't hold him back. Once he got that video on air, then it was pretty much over with.